Hi, I'm Ingrid, and I love birds. For decades, I've been watching the feeders in my yard, enjoying the birds that migrate through Maine each spring and fall. I even have a small hobby of collecting old bird guides and books. Then, in 2013, I met and fell in love with Ethan, a software developer with a great sense of humor and a reputation for doing everything in a big way. Ethan had a lot of fun teasing me about my passion for birds, but I could tell he was interested. At the beginning of our first June together, we went to a birding festival in Bar Harbor, Maine. At one point, we were out in the forest with a group of birders watching a beautiful male indigo bunting singing. Ethan was focused on a herd of deer nearby. He made a bit of a scene imploring everyone to look at the deer. It took him a while, but by the end of the weekend, Ethan had caught the birding bug. And as usual, Ethan caught it in a big way. Soon we were rushing out the door to see rare birds in Maine, spending our free time in marshes, bogs, forests, mountains, and beaches looking for birds. We traveled to Texas, Arizona, California, and Washington on birding adventures. Then came Ethan's Maine Big Year. A big year is an unofficial contest among birders to see as many species of birds as possible in a geographical area in a single calendar year. Big years can cover a county, state, a country, a continent, or even the entire world. In 2021, Ethan drove 60,000 miles around the state of Maine and identified 324 species, breaking the 2017 record by 7 birds. Incredibly, on December 31, his final bird was the famous Steller's sea eagle, a bird of the Russian ice, and perhaps the rarest bird ever to visit Maine. Now, I too, like Ethan, have retired, and together we are preparing for our next big adventure, a couple's big year, trying to see as many birds as possible across the lower 48 states of the USA. Big years require extensive planning, determination, and a willingness to change plans on a moment's notice. With that in mind, the plan I'm about to describe may look totally different when our big year begins on January 1, 2024. Winters in Maine can be long, dark, and cold. So, will we be spending January in Florida or Arizona? Of course not. That would make too much sense. Instead, we will spend most of January chasing winter birds that enjoy Maine's cold climate and then head north into Canada when things warm up. We will be taking a trip in mid-January to Minnesota, a place even colder than Maine, to locate owls. On February 1st, we will be loading up our Subaru Outback and begin a long drive to Florida. Along the way, we'll be stopping for unique birds. For instance, most winters a rare tufted duck shows up on Nantucket Island in Massachusetts. We'll also try to locate a red-cockaded woodpecker in South Carolina or Georgia. Our plan has us spending a week and a half in Florida, moving from the northeast Jacksonville area, down through Miami to the Keys, then up through Tampa and over through the Panhandle. In our travels, we hope to find a real American flamingo, not the plastic kind. Special attention will be paid to finding the numerous parrots and parakeets that make Miami and Tampa their home. After Florida, our plan will have us driving west to Texas, where we will go work our way south along the Gulf Coast, picking up birds, such as whooping cranes, as we go. We'll spend a week along the Rio Grande, hoping to see Mexican species that occasionally stray north into the USA and become countable in our big year. At that point, we'll leave our car at our son and daughter-in-law's home outside of San Antonio and fly back to Maine for about 3 weeks. This will be mid-March, and a few migrating birds will be arriving in Maine, although it will still be winter. At the end of March, we'll return to Texas and pick up our car and head toward the Big Bend area of the state. There we'll spend a few days chasing regional birds and those heading north from Mexico and South America. From there, it will be Santa Fe and Albuquerque in the mountains of New Mexico. The second week of April will be spent in Arizona, where we will work the area around the U.S.-Mexican border before turning north for the Grand Canyon. This will be our first trip of the big year to Arizona. We will be returning in August for the monsoon season. By mid-April, with neotropical birds stacking up in Central and South America, preparing for their migration through the Northeast, it will be time for us to point our Subaru Outback back toward Maine and begin the long drive home. But not without stops along the way, of course. In Colorado for the Gunnison sage grouse, and in Kansas for the greater and lesser prairie chickens. With luck, we will pick up some rarities and migrating birds during our trip home. The month of May presents some challenges in a big year. Birds are migrating north, some are already on their nests. Timing is everything, and it would be nice if one could be in multiple places at the same time. Accordingly, in the second week of May, we'll be on a plane heading for Florida and the Dry Tortugas. A national park located 60 miles off the Florida Keys, the Dry Tortugas is the best place in the country to find boobies and noddies, not to mention the thousands of exhausted birds that land on these islands to rest on their trip across the Gulf of Mexico. Early June will find us on Mount Washington in New Hampshire, the tallest mountain east of the Mississippi, in search of the bignell thrush, a species that only nests at 4,000 feet, just below the tree line. Mid-June will find us on a plane again, heading toward the Pacific Northwest. We'll make a brief stop in Michigan to see the endangered Kirtland's warbler, a species that nests exclusively in short jack pine trees in areas recovering from fire. Washington State will be our first pelagic trip of the year and where we hope to see our first albatross. Back on land, our target species will be the elusive spotted owl. Mercifully, the second half of June begins an extended period at home in Maine, enjoying our spectacular summer through early August. We'll probably leave our beloved Maine coon cats, Mr. Bates and Mr. Tufts, for a day or so, here and there, to chase a rarity in Massachusetts or Connecticut, and we'll take a nearby tourist boat out to see Atlantic puffins. After our rest, the second week in August will have us on a plane heading to the Southeast Arizona Birding Festival and its legendary second spring, caused by heavy summer rains. Birds move up from Mexico and down from neighboring U.S. states to feast on insects and blooming flowers. Late August will find us on a pelagic trip out of Cape Hatteras, North Carolina, where the warm waters of the Gulf Stream bring Jaegers, petrels, and tropic birds close to land. Our last scheduled trip of our big year will be what we are calling our California Cleanup, combining autumn migration with the hundreds of species that live in this large Pacific Coast state. We'll bookend a pelagic trip out of San Diego at the beginning of our visit, with one at the end of the trip in Monterey Bay. While there, we will visit the shrinking Salton Sea, the awe-inspiring Yosemite National Park, and finally Santa Cruz Island, to see the incredible island scrub jay, a bird found on this island and nowhere else in the world. October, November, and December will be spent in Maine, waiting for any rarity that can be reasonably chased. Of course, we'll be hoping our stellar sea eagle returns to Maine as it has in 2021, 2022, and 2023, adding a tick to yet another big year. Ethan and I hope you have enjoyed our preview and will follow our 2024 big year by visiting bigyearbirding.com. You can subscribe and be notified of new blog posts and or videos by clicking the subscribe button on bigyearbirding.com. We wish you happy birding.